last year I took a career break. I took 6 months off, which is something I'd never done before. And it so happened that 3 colleagues were doing something similar around the same time. So afterwards, when we were all back in work mode, we got together and we said, why don't we try to capture some of the insights, some of the lessons from what we got from the career breaks? So we went into the studio and we recorded the conversation that you're just about to hear. It was rich, it was wide-ranging. We covered such a range of territory, from why we took the breaks, what was hard about planning, what was hard about doing it, what was the value, what were the challenges that we faced from not just our own mindsets, but also from other people as well. How did we navigate it? What did we do? And what was the value that we got from it? And all of this comes through in the conversation with a really diverse set of perspectives. Hi, I'm Digby Scott. This is Dig Deeper, a podcast where I have conversations with depth that'll change the way you lead. In order of appearance, the people I'm in conversation with are Katie Hare, who you can find out more about in episode 5, Jodi Willocks, who I have on the podcast in episode 10, and Colm Kearney, who you haven't heard from yet, but I no doubt will be a guest in the future. This is a wide-ranging conversation with lots of practical things for you to think about if you're considering a career break at some time in the future. Without further ado, let's dive in. I hope you enjoy it.
Shall we get into it? I thought we would start with a question, which was all of us having to have a go at answering this. When were you most happiest and why?
What, in life?
In life. When were you most happiest and why?
That's like I was not expecting that question.
It's a left field one.
Yeah.
I think the problem with saying most is it throws people and people can't find that one point. So it's like, it's the same thing as like, tell me that the best thing happened your weekend is supposed to...
I love how we're
Over some good
avoiding
things.
answering the question.
Yeah. Because I know what brings me a lot of joy in life, that brings me that happiness.
All right.
Yeah.
Go.
And so there's a little activity that I did, which was over the course of a few months. I wrote... anytime that I was just feeling a moment of joy, happiness, all of those good things, I would write what was going on in my diary. And over the course of like a couple of months, you'd like go back through that diary and there's like a consistent theme. And so it was like, I've been chatting with a family member, I've been traveling, I kicked ass at something at work that made me feel really good, I was going for a walk, I'd done some exercise, I was in sunshine, I was traveling. And those are things that still pay really, really true to this day.
I love that. It's like listen for the spark, right? And then notice it. Yeah, so it's not one time. Yeah. What about you guys?
For me, it's a place, actually. So the first thing, there's probably loads of things, but the first thing that came to mind for me when you said when you're at your most happiest, it's at the beach on the coast, near some waves with some sand.
Is it specifically which coast, or it doesn't matter?
It's either Mount Maunganui or Waipu Cove.
What is it about there?
Oh, it's happy childhood memories, probably. Yeah, beautiful, see your feet at the bottom of the ocean kind of vibe. Summer.
Childhood memories are a good one, eh?
Yeah.
Places that evoke childhood memories that are good.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a freedom then, isn't there too, right?
And a sense of peace and calm.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll loop back to these things in this conversation, I reckon, eh? So have you come up with something, Colm?
I think, building on that, I think sometimes it's around when you stop rushing from thing to thing and you're actually there. That's when it's like, getting here today is like rush, and then you're here and then you can relax here. And then you're just being there. So if I think, I don't really, there's things I've had amazing memories of. But if I think about being happy in the day to day, not every moment is the happiest moment. But yesterday at work, we had a quarterly planning day and you're in the mix of it and you're right in the flow of it. That's really happy because you're having fun, it's strategic. But if I go back a week before, I had a day, something cancelled, and I just went for a walk and ended up ringing people and having a good old chat on the phone and eating and drinking my ways just on a big walk, and that was amazing. And so most of the time it's just like doing the things you want to do when you're there.
It's kind of like being present, right?
Yeah, being where your feet is the easiest thing.
It's such a good segue.
Segue.
So I was back in Western Australia a few months ago, and a friend of mine, he's kind of retired. You could say he's on a really long-term sabbatical, and he's currently sailing with his wife around Indonesia. They've got a yacht and stuff like that. And they came back to Perth for a few weeks, and I said, his name's Maff. Maff, what do you notice when you're back in civilization? What do you see when you're in the city? What do you notice compared to when you're up in Indo sailing around? He says, everyone's got somewhere to be next. And you've got to okay, the next thing on my list or the next place to be and all of this, and this is keeping moving, which stops you from being present, right? And that's so for me, it was like that triggers me to go, when was I most happy? I think it's the same. I think it's this stillness, periods of stillness where there is nowhere to be next. There's no thing I have to achieve or do or be accountable for. And I think about sabbatical. When people were asking me what was it like or what is it like, I said, I love not having deadlines. I love this thing of not having to be somewhere else. I can just design my day.
Yeah, I've used the word to describe that as like luxurious. Like it actually is feeling luxurious when you're in the space where it's like true freedom. You're just like, could do whatever I want to do. Absolutely. Don't have anything to be or do. Yeah.
Well, you're kind of one thing, you're removing a giant set of expectations and deadlines and stuff by taking out that job part.
Yeah.
And that takes up about 40 hours of commitment. 40 to 60 depending.
Absolutely. And it's kind of unfamiliar a lot of the time, isn't it? It's like, so what do I do this time? Right? How do I use it? Right. Yeah. So we're coming together because we've all taken sabbaticals in the last 12 plus months. 12 to 18 months. And the idea is for us to share our thoughts about that, our experiences, our stories, our lessons, our insights. So for anyone watching or listening, it's something that's useful for them. It might trigger them to think about doing it, or it might be a bit of a broader agenda around how do we get our people to start to think about a different way of living and working. So who knows where it's going to go. I'm so excited for this. There's so many ways we could go. What I thought would be good is maybe we could each share a little bit about why did we choose to do this? If we go back to when we were thinking about, I think I'm going to take some time out. You might not even call it sabbatical, but what was the trigger? What was the kind of the starting point for that decision?
Just before we get into that, you sort of triggered something which was around the word sabbatical versus the word career break, which is kind of more the word that I've been using, because in some respects there's a word association around sabbatical, which is you will come back to the same job, maybe, for some people. And I think that's kind of, gets associated with like some of the education sector and things like that, where
like academics.
Come from academia, exactly. And so like the career break for me is like, I'm not coming back to a job. And that was quite important because I was very deliberate about not wanting to have anything to go back to. And so that break, it was almost like, for me, it was like the intention was a career reset, something to sort of springboard into, to kind of like shake things up massively. And the idea of having a job to go back into was absolutely not what I wanted from that.
Is that because you felt like that would have been the safe option? Or it wouldn't have created as much creativity?
It is the safe option, and it's also one where it's constraining, like it's too constraining in terms of what the possibilities are. And I've had that before. I've done this about 4 times. And one of the times that I did do it, I was offered kind of, I guess you could, to make it a sabbatical. And that felt safe for me. I was going overseas. I was like, awesome. But it was always this thing that was like, I could go back to my job off. And things got a bit hard in London, first time there. And I was like, I could go back to New Zealand. And instead it was like, eventually I made the decision not to, which was great. But I kind of learned a lesson from that.
How did you know when it was time to take the career break? Like what was your body or your mind or your circumstances telling you? How did you know to go?
The most recent one?
Yeah.
It was almost like a conviction, because that it's time for another one. Yeah, it's like I know that this will benefit me. I've been in my role for 5 years, and I was like, I am ready to shake things up and move to the next stage of the iteration of what I will be becoming in my life and as a person. And
It sounds like there was
time.
gut, and there was also recognising a pattern that you've done this before.
Absolutely. There's like a conviction that now's about the right time. Get into it.
Yeah. So it was like this gut feeling. How about you, Jodi? What was your circumstances? I think were a bit different, right, for you?
Mine were a bit different. And I'm much like Katie. I haven't been referring to it as a sabbatical so much as a career break, but really it was the same idea. It was a reset. So for me, it was instinct, but I'd been getting signals for a while and I'd been conveniently ignoring them until it got to a point where the voice was kind of quite shouty. So mine came about. I knew it was time for a change because I'd got to a point in my role where I didn't feel like I was growing anymore. And also the nature of the role had evolved over the years that I'd been there to a point where I felt like I was spending the majority of my time doing stuff that I actually didn't really enjoy and I also wasn't often very good at. So I just didn't feel like I was being my best self at work or at home. And I think it was the home, it was eventually realising that it was affecting how I was showing up at home that was the trigger for me to make that step.
Yeah, wow. And what was it like when you committed to it? To decide, actually, I'm not going to go straight back into another job. Actually, just take a whole lot of time out. What was that like?
It was, I've got this friend who has coined the term nerve-sighted, and it's this combination of being nervous and excited at the same time. I think it was scary because we don't have a crystal ball. So I didn't know what was going to come out the other end, but I was also excited because I knew, like I had the courage that comes from conviction, and I just knew it was the right thing to do, and I knew that if I didn't, it would be damaging or negative in some way.
Yeah, there'd be something eroding, right?
Yeah.
You've both used the word conviction, hey? It's like this, I've got to do this.
Yeah, it really did feel like that.
Yeah.
Benjamin Harvey talks about forcing functions. It's something you do and then you kind of like, you close the gate behind you, you've jumped off the cliff and you're into it then.
Totally, yeah.
There's no turning back.
No, a friend of mine described it as like two people on trapezes, you know, when one lets go of their trapeze and then they're floating through the air until that point where they grab onto the person on the other trapeze.
Yeah.
So it's that terrifying, you're in midair, you can't go back. You've kind of got to go where you're going, but you're in that space. Yeah.
Going through the liminal, I still say going through the liminal to people and they're like, what is that? I said, Digby Scott said it one time there. Let me tell you about it. But it's, what is it, the in between and not there yet?
It's the space between no longer and not yet. Yeah, I love that as an idea, right? So what about you, Colm? What was your trigger for taking a bunch of time out? So again, I think your story is different.
I feel the same thing about the labels. I only came to sabbatical probably later after I left, really, as a label. I was in my role for about 9 years or something. I had 4 different versions of the role, I've been through 4 roles in the organisation, and I was coming to the end of something I've been leading for 2-3 years, and I was thinking, I was kind of weighing on what to do next as well, and I actually thought this is a really good opportunity, rather than staying and continue to, I could find new roles, it'd be cool as well, but I was thinking, this would be a really good time to go because, you don't get the time, you often don't get the chance to go when things are going really well or at the top of things. Sometimes you stay too long, you get bored or you get shoved out or whatever. So I said, actually, this is like, leaving well with great memories. And so that opportunity came and I was taking a career break really, which was a holiday to start with. Like it really was a holiday to start with, but I knew it was going to be a bit more of a break because I hadn't been home to Ireland for 4 and a bit years because of COVID. But then it kind of morphed as there was things I wanted to do. I just didn't think you could do them while you were working as well. And and we'll get to that later in a bit, but I took the break and then was actually really embracing the break and being on the break. And someone said to me once, like after 3 months, because what's it like being unemployed? I said, I'm not unemployed, I'm on a sabbatical. They're like, what? I was like, So
language is so powerful, isn't it? The language that we use for this, like career break, sabbatical, unemployed, all of these labels have connotations. So I was like, what do you call it? And I know someone asked the question before. It's like what if you get judged? But what's your fear of judgment from other people around this? Well, it depends on how you frame it, right? If it's like, I'm unemployed, that has lots of connotations, doesn't it, around societal judgment.
Huge, eh? It's weird, to be fair, but I get where it comes from, but it's still like, oh, haven't we grown out of that shit?
Maybe not.
But not. Like, people are like, oh, so what do you did something happen? Did you get burnt out? I'm like, nah.
No, which is funny, right? Because so linking to you, Colm, I remember you sent me a bit about your leaving speech or whatever it was called, right? And I remember reading that, and it was all about, when you said just then, kind of going out at the top of the curve, if you like, and I love that idea that you don't have to wait for a burnout to go, oh, I need to take a break. So I remember for me, when I was in my early 30s, I was a national manager of a recruitment company here, and I did hit the wall because I had no idea what I was doing in this high-powered role, and I was just burning myself out, and I did burn out. And I said at the time, it's kind of good to have an early midlife crisis, right? Yeah. And because it was the forcing function that caused me to stop. And then I did a bit of contracting. But like you, Katie, there was sort of like this, the value of taking a bunch of time out before I went and did my next thing was so helpful. But it was just the way I got there was quite unfortunate because my confidence was shot for years after that in terms of leadership. Yeah. This time round, so I reckon I'd been wanting to take a bunch of time out from my practice for a couple of years, but I'd never either had the financial sort of wherewithal to fund it or the courage to step away from the market, if you like, to go, I'm just not going to be around for a while because I like to serve my clients and be available. And then there was this, but what if I become irrelevant? And then I think the thing, like you two were talking about conviction, it was like, I have to do this, and I'm not burned out. I kept saying to people, I'm not burned out and I'm not bored. In retrospect, now looking back, I wasn't burned out, but I think I was a bit bored. And it's like you, Jodi, it's like this, I just need to reset. I just need to reconnect. It's probably reconnect was the thing for me, more than I need to recover. There wasn't really a recovery thing. But it was, that's the thing that led me there. It's like, I really want to do this, and I have no idea what I'm going to do, which was the jumping from the trapeze thing, right? So we've all jumped, right? Was there any sort of people around us at the time who were like either detracting or encouraging? Do you remember back in the day, it was like people that either helped you let go or people were like, well, what are you doing that for? That kind of helped you or stopped you in your tracks and got you second guessing?
I had both.
Yeah.
So I think what enabled me to take the jump was a supporter saying, just do it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of all I needed. And all of a sudden, boom, I was away. And I moved really quickly off the back of that, and that unsettled a lot of other people around me. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I'd been thinking about it for a long time in my head or feeling it in my body, and not necessarily communicating it.
Yeah.
But then, there were detractors or people who were sort of cautioning me not to stay out of the market too long because there's an economic recession coming, or apparently.
What?
But also, I think, there was also a feeling of as a mother, I also had feelings of guilt about prioritising myself over my family and the financial well-being of the family as well, which I had to navigate through.
So one of the people was the voice in your head.
That person was very shouty. The entire, a lot of the time.
What were they saying? Like, don't be a bad mum? What else was there?
Don't be you're being selfish. You're prioritising yourself over others. You're a quitter.
That's a biggie.
It was noisy. Yeah.
Oh wow! And you still jumped.
I still jumped. And that was the conviction.
Yeah. It's powerful, hey. And what about Katie or Colm? What was going on for you in terms of people?
I was trying to think because I was like, oh no, it was all good. And then like nobody was saying anything. And then I forgot that there was actually this thing called COVID, and we'd just come out of a lockdown sort of thing. And then it was like, well, what if we go into another lockdown? And I was planning on this, and so it was like, oh yeah, that might be a bit shit if like I planning all this time off and I'm actually just stuck in the house, And I was like, so I had to think through that. And everybody, a few people were saying, well, what if this happens? And then of course, and then it's extended for a while, and then maybe you won't be able to work through it. Whereas if you are in lockdown, you've still got your job, or at least you can work through it because you're doing computer, we're doing it remotely. And I was like, so it did give me a little pause, but not enough to stop me. And it was all about, well, that means I can just do all this learning that I want to do and all these other things that I had planned to do on my sabbatical. And I'm pretty sure I can get a job remotely still if I really feel the need to. So it was kind of one of those things that gave me a bit of pause, but just enough to go, well, just make sure you got your ducks in a row and then keep moving.
Yeah. There was a lot of, I think that what I saw in you was, again, the conviction. It's like, nah, I back myself.
Yeah.
Nah, we'll be fine. Get my ducks in a row. Yeah. Actually, there will be people who are watching this asking about the pragmatics of preparation for this. Like how did you prepare? And we've talked a lot about like the mental state, but was there there's a financial piece, there's probably a comms piece. What were the pragmatics to set you up so you could let go of the bar?
I remember the timing as well. I was thinking it was just around Christmas. I've been thinking about what was happening next year, and I kind of came back into the new year after a break with a fresh approach and trying to take a bit of pressure off myself and what I was thinking about at the time, and started to enjoy things a bit more. And it was around then I started thinking about, well, it was kind of like the middle of the year that the thing I was leading was finishing up. I was like, oh, what will I do next, and so on. I started thinking about the things I wanted to do. And so there's a pragmatic thing. I talked to Katie actually, because I know Katie was in her sabbatical or kind of somewhere toward, I think you're in or about to go into it.
Nearing the end, something like that.
So I was chatting to Katie as well, and then started formulating my own plans. And so practical tool I did was Tim Ferriss's fear setting tool, so which was a really good way to just go through, okay, here's all the bad things, and take whatever it is. I won't ever get a job again, and you go through the mitigations and so on, you work through it.
Yeah.
I started this planning around money as well. I did all that kind of stuff. But then I also started thinking about what I wanted to do on the thing, and some of those things became great. And I didn't have it all planned out at all. So.
Yeah. It's funny because I did a lot of financial planning, and so I sort of saved for ages to make sure that I was good. But I think the thing that I was probably more courageous around was the not planning much at all in terms of activities. It was like, so I did a month in Western Australia at the start, and that was a really good sort of geographical distancing from my normal world. I know you did the same with the Camino, right? And there was this kind of step away. But then I came back, it's like, I've got 5 more months, because I said 6 months. Like, what do I do with this? And part of me was regretting not planning at that activities, because I kind of went into this whole, I called it foggy February. So it's like, I haven't planned it. Okay, now I need to make the most of my time. And it was, and I was starting to regret not kind of doing all this pre-planning about activities. In retrospect, it was great not having that, because it forced me to stop and actually just be different every day, right? Yeah.
I had some plans, I think. I had big chunks like the Camino, and I'll chat again in a second about that. But there was things I also was like, there's things I wanted to do. And I was thinking, when can I do them and so on. And I started towards the end, when you're finishing your job and you're about to fly off to Europe, and I was going to go back for 11, 12 weeks. And then you're trying to do all these things. And I had this long list of things, and I was ticking them off. And towards the end, I was getting so sick of how much stuff I had to take off. It was like, I was thinking about it. And the best thing I did, it was great. I turned a lot of things green. And then I said, I can't be bothered doing all these. And I kind of just said, I'm not going to do any rest of them. It's the best thing I ever did. I stopped thinking about those ones. Because you could keep filling full of tasks to do.
Yeah. Mine was just about intention sort of setting at the start. And so I kind of came up with some themes to kind of carve up the period into quarters. And so for me, the first sort of theme was reinvesting. and it was like reinvesting in things that really mattered to me. So, you know, spending time with family. It was around, you know, late December, January, so I knew that everybody would be taking their holidays. So I was like, well, I'm absolutely going to be holidaying with everybody else, so that's taken care of for a few months. It was redoing my retirement plan and, you know, stuff like that, which you don't do or think about until you've got like quite a lot of time. And I was just like, even just really spending time to just kind of make sure that I was kind of focusing on those health things, stuff that just kind of matters, without worrying too much about it. And then the next phase I'd sort of designed as exploring. And for me, that was like almost doing a bit of tire kicking, coffee catch-ups, thinking about what could be next, doing a lot of reading about what that next shift for me from a career perspective was, but not doing it. And in exploring, it was sort of also with the hope that if it worked out, being able to do a bit of travelling as well, which I was lucky enough to do. And then it was moving into experimenting, and so with a view that whatever I did, I'd hold it lightly, and I would make sure that I might work out, it might not. It was experimental, and I was actually using that language as I was speaking
when you started
to
contracting,
people. So I started experimenting with contracting, and I didn't know if I was going to do it and if I was going to go back into a leadership role, but it felt good to just be having that as the overarching theme. And then it was becoming. And I feel like becoming into whatever that next thing is, that new part of identity, that's whatever I'm shaping myself to be next. And I feel like I'm still in between experimenting and becoming.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know when that's good enough.
And maybe that will go for a long time.
Yeah,
Who knows?
exactly.
Right? Yeah. What was the first one called?
Next career break.
Yeah, exactly. Back to loops.
And
I think that's probably got a lot of truth to it. So what was the first one?
It was reinvesting.
Reinvesting. Yeah. Did you have those labels before you went? Yeah. So you already had kind of like this art.
And this is what we're talking about, this balance between how much do you plan out versus how much do you just not. And, you know, there's a really cool video by Stefan Sagmeister called The Power of Time Off, and it's one of my favourite videos of all time. Everybody should watch it. And it's a TED Talk, and it's kind of like, he kind of gets into a balance of having every 7 years some time off, which is sort of what's inspired me to attempt to do this every 5 to 7 years myself. But part of it was he tried it once and it kind of went a bit rubbish because it was very so unplanned and unstructured that he had a really nice time, but it kind of felt a bit more like a holiday. And then he did it a second time with a bit more intention. Now his intention was slightly different from how I've done it, but it really stuck in my head around being a bit more mindful about the time that you want to have off, so, and how you want to spend it. So it was just enough for me to kind of put enough structure around what I'd hoped to do and outline some ideas about things that I wanted to achieve, but that was good enough, and then just go to it.
You were really inspiring for me because you kind of went first, I think, out of all of us actually, and so to have like, there's that intentionality was really helpful. And the experience of every day was definitely not like, I'm living in this chapter right now, but it definitely helped me in my mind go, there's a direction here. Yeah, it was really helpful. What about you, Jodi? Was there a structure that you'd planned, or was it more like, I'll just see what happens?
Well, not to begin with, but then you introduced me to Katie, and I thought, actually, that's a good idea. I should probably put some thought into this. But to begin with, I mean, one of the words that we've used so far in this conversation that really lands for me is space. And to begin with, I was actually really anti the idea of having stuff to do because I'd spent so long in a senior leadership role with so much stuff to do that I just wanted space. So my first chapter, I called it renewal, and for me that was about actually switching everything off. I didn't get to go and have a holiday anywhere sort of glamorous, but I did just switch off, and I really needed to refuel myself, like recharge my batteries. And I also spent some really beautiful time in hindsight with family and old friends who I hadn't seen in years. I did a road trip with the kids and visited every town we went to. I had a friend somewhere, and it was just so cup-filling. And I think it was about that time that I spoke to you, Katie, and then I thought, actually, I should put some structure to this. And And a few other people in my life had been asking when I was going to do something. So I thought maybe having a bit of a plan would be useful. But same as Katie, I had a plan, but I kept it loose. I wasn't giving myself too much kind of pressure to stick to something rigid.
It's almost like you had the title of the chapter, but you didn't have to write all the words down beforehand, right? You just needed to know what the title was going to be. Yeah. I was a bit the same. Like, interesting what you just brought up there is something about people asking you, what are you going to do with the time? And I found this pressure to, like, are you going to write another book? Or are you going to, like, go and start a podcast or blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, I don't know. But it was sort of, I felt like I had to justify to other people that my time was, including myself, actually lots of times, like how I'm using this time and how it was like, oh wow, what if we could just get to a place where we didn't have to justify how we use 24 hours.
But I feel like almost in that's just helpful to have a little strap line at the ready. I can't remember, but it was just something like, I'm just experimenting.
Like,
this is my time off to experiment.
None of your business,
but being really deliberate and being like, I'm experimenting, I am exploring options, I am not looking for anything permanent full time, I am not looking for any of this during this period. I'm very deliberate.
I think the word experimenting is really cool.
Experimenting is a great word.
Yes.
And being able to have those chapters, if you like, or that high level loose plan to share.
Yeah.
Because there is, I felt pressure too.
Yeah.
And I felt pressure to actually have a definitive answer or an end time to be able to commit to people.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Colm, you've been listening away here. What's going on in your mind? What are you noticing?
I think, well, for the last part as well, I think it's easy looking back, but I think everyone's interested, and it's like, I think it's like your family love you, your friends love you, and some love you more than others because you're closer friends, right? That's just life, right? You can have friends with everybody. That's right.
It's true, yeah.
It's just true, right? So and there's nothing bad about that. There's a lot of people, and so everyone's interested, but their levels of interest is probably higher in our heads than in their heads. It's like they think, oh God. They might think about you for 5 seconds or 5 minutes or talk about you, but that level goes up by how close you are to them. And so you kind of like, it's nice to have an answer, but then they probably don't care about you 5 minutes after you've left the room, or 2 minutes.
That's really.
And care is a bad word, sorry. I mean, they're not thinking, because everyone's got their own lives to live and things to do.
There's also a bit of curiosity, right? And it's just coming from places of curiosity, like, oh, you're doing something that not everybody else is doing right now. Most people are working, so this is interesting.
Yeah. And it's from a positive place, because I didn't have, no one said, I never heard any bad thing or judgment for the thing. This is like, and I had an answer as well. It's like, I haven't been home for 4 years. I'm going to go home. I'm going to do this big walk, and I'm going to see what's next. Is my kind of answer.
It is interesting. Sorry, go on, I'll cut you off there.
And that was. So that was enough, because I didn't really know what was next, and I was partly deliberately not having a next. I was like, I'm taking this break from having a next, and my next was doing this walk, and the walk itself was this whole thing. Like, so I did the Camino de Santiago for 5 weeks or something, and I didn't know much about it apart from I wanted to do it for a while. When I got home, I'd booked a ticket to go over there, and I hadn't booked a return ticket. And after 10 days, I said, I'll do it. So I booked a return ticket in about a month's time. And that was an almost entire, I don't know what the heck you'd call it. It was like this whole thing about all you ever did was get up every morning. You'd walk the 20K, 25K, 30K, whatever it is. You made a whole bunch of friends along the way. Some would walk with you the whole time. Some you'd never see again after a couple of days. You got to a place, you found a place to sleep, you ate, you had a good time with people, and you got up and repeated it for 5 weeks, and you stopped caring about the news around the world. You stopped caring about it. Not that you didn't care. It's just like you were just there doing that with a bunch of other people who's all were on the same goal, which is to get to this place for different reasons. Yeah. And it was just the most peaceful thing. And I met people before I had left who had done it multiple times. Like, why would you want to do it multiple times? Once is hard enough, isn't it? And I did, and I go absolutely, it is. And I still got 14 close friends who I met on that trip from all over the world, and it was just this beautiful thing. We're all walking to somewhere. It's all very relaxed, and I think I took so much from that into the rest of my time, and I still carry it with me today, which is around I met a Croatian guy, Uri, and he said, everyone has a reason for doing it. And his things like, what did he say? He said, I didn't come here for answers, I came here for questions. And I thought that was really nice because there's a time to think about what's next and so on. And for me, it was the same thing. I came out of that thing with a lot of questions and a lot of things, which my second, like if that was first 3 months, my second 3 months, I spent a lot of time thinking about where in career I wanted to go next, and what's my, how will I be intentionally? So, combining stuff like the Career Odyssey stuff and Year by Design stuff as well. So that became a lot of my intention for the second 3 months.
There's so much in that. There's something about all of our stories which is creating space, Jodi, to go deep on something and to explore and experiment. So and so for you it was like, I'm not quite sure, but I know the Camino is going to give me something and some questions to explore. Yours was that, what can I experiment with? Now there's this idea, another thing that's come up just in listening to all of our stories is we've used the word time off. And off from what? And why does it have to be the exception rather than the kind of the thing that could be a little bit more integrated or normal? Do you know what I mean? It's like if time off is this kind of little bit, but the time on is the main gig, that seems to be what's going on here. What's and if time off then needs permission, because it seems to be some of our stories are about it being okay to not do the normal thing. What is that saying about our organisations, how we think about careers, how we think about society, this whole idea of time off? I'm kind of going bigger here.
Yeah. Well, we've never really got out of the cycle that, I don't know, from with the Industrial Revolution of getting out of the 40-hour week or whatever, and there's some experiments that are happening with that at the moment, where people are like, oh, we'll pay you for 5 days, but we'll have you working 4, and, lots of studies are showing where people are as productive and even, more engaged and happy, yet the evidence is there and it's coming through, not many organisations are experimenting with it. What's up with that? There's this kind of stuff that's sort of stuck there, that people are still finding really hard to break out of, regardless of what the evidence is sort of showing, which is interesting.
The other interesting dimension is the career ladder concept and continuing to climb up the ladder, which goes back to that era that you're talking about. But to use your word, Digby, that's considered normal. The 9 to 5, 40-hour week and climbing the career ladder is what we define as normal. Why should a career break be abnormal? I mean, maybe the opportunity is to normalise this as part of what the future of work looks like, which is being intentional about designing our time in a way that creates space for us to
100%.
rejuvenate, refresh. I mean, there's a whole lot of research out there that says that our mental capacity and creativity increases when we have space, and design that and be disciplined about that into periods of time in our lives.
And I would say that we've also, let's acknowledge, we've all taken some pretty significant periods of time off, right? I was 6 months. What were you?
7, 8.
7. Yours is sort of still
The hybrid, still going.
What were you, Jodi? 3, 4?
I was 3. My intention was 5 to 6, but we had some family kind of...
Life got in the way.
And we needed to shorten it. But for me, that the experiment of taking the career break was a successful one, and the benefits were realised, and I would absolutely do it again.
Great. So we'll loop back to the would you do it again. The idea of, does it have to be 3, 4, 6, 7 months? Well, look, nah. So what does it need to have? Well, in your experience, for it to be beneficial, if it's not a time-bound thing so much, what does it actually have to be about, and what does it have to have?
I come back to that word intention. It's quite individualised, I think. And the more people that I talk to about this, I'm like, oh, well, it is around, well, what would you be hoping to get out of that sort of time off? And if it kind of is it sort of feels to me like the more that you talk to people about when they're doing it, it's like it's more than taking a break to go to travel, then to do the house up because you haven't had time and you're working, or taking a break between two jobs. There's just something a little bit more than that. There's something deeper than that. That's kind of like, and when you talk about that with people, there's kind of about what they're hoping to achieve, and that helps with it. And then there's absolutely the pragmatic, sort of practical, how much can I afford? And
Could be 3 weeks, right?
and what are these other things that are going on in my life in terms of family commitments or anything else? That's kind of like, there's total practical element to this that it will be different for everybody.
Totally. Yeah. What do you reckon has to be there, Colm? What in terms of the elements that make it work? If it wasn't 6 or 7 months.
I think there's a lot of in what you said, which is like, again, a fundamental what's life about. Because one of the things that's worth thinking about, if you zoom out of your life and, say you work 30 to 40 years, we're talking about 3 to 6 months in a 40-year period. That's insanity to not be able to think that, like, I can do. It's absolute insanity. So where does that come from? So I think there's like so to go right back to where we kind of introed this conversation was, what is happiness, right? So happiness is very loaded. Everyone's, I like words too, and people can get loaded, pursuing happiness and everything's very individualistic, of course, right? But there is something going into trying to work out what are the things that actually matter to me, not because society has programmed me that it should matter to me, but actually the things that really I'm interested, I want to do, And so when careers, what happens is you get into it, and maybe you're in a great job as well, but you kind of following that pathway. And so sometimes having a circuit break, like a career break or like a sabbatical, like any time off goes, am I aligned to what I really want to be doing?
Totally.
And then there's another part where people are, and it's fine. Anyone's allowed to do whatever they want, really, within reason. But like, there's always some kind of guardrails. But in a career prospect, spending 40 years going through something, not really loving it, but your energy's going somewhere else. What actually getting really into going, what do I really want to do? And what would I give up in order to have more space in my life to do other stuff and to experiment with that that's really hard stuff. And I guess what I say is it's really hard to do that while you're in a job.
It totally is.
Yeah.
It's you often end up, you get to a place, and many of us do in our careers, where we're there, to your point, almost by default. You sort of arrive somewhere, how did I get here? And I think for me, one of the learnings I had through this process was talking to lots of people, and Katie and I have been having regular conversations with the group and other people as well who are all experiencing this similar kind of desire for a shift. And I kind of almost, in my mind, had sort of created 3 buckets. There's people who are, for some people it's a break up, for some it's a break away, and for others it's a breakthrough. And for me it was more about that, really diving into what was it about who I am as a person and where I was at in life that needed to influence what I did next. And you don't have the capacity or the space to do that when you're working full time.
100%. It's interesting. There's so many ways we could go here. One, I think for me, it was talking about the story I was talking about before. It's like I wasn't bored and I wasn't burned out, and then I realised I was probably a bit bored. And for me, it was, I'm trying to think, was it breakaway or breakthrough? But it was that idea of I just need the space to let the snow globe settle. Like there's, busy life, all this stuff. What if I just let everything settle for a bit? What's there that I can see a bit more clearly? And what happened for me was kind of a renewal of the vows. It was like, I love what I do, and I now feel it in my gut more than I did before. And so it wasn't even that I needed to change. I just needed to stop. And that was the key bit for me, was the stopping, letting go. So you called it, what did you call it? Reinvestment. I call it evaporation. just let everything go and just let it all go away and see what remains. And that was such a good frame for it. The other thing that came up was, you know, that book, there's the book, The 100-Year Life, and we're talking about, you know, Linda Gratt and Andrew Scott, they talk about if we're going to live to 100, then the 40-year or 50-year career is just rubbish. And their challenge is we need to learn how to reinvent. We need to be able to enable people to learn how to reinvent regularly through their entire 100 years, right? And so I think an idea where you call it sabbatical or career break is an opportunity to reinvent if you want, or at least test where you want to reinvent, right? And how do we build that in more deliberately? I think that's probably the question we're all asking, right, for other people.
And how do we create the language around it and give people the permission to do it? Because it's so worthwhile.
I was just going to say that regarding evaporation, it's almost like letting go of the expectations. Because I think you build up these expectations over your career and your life and everyone else around you, and it's almost like this break is a chance to actually reset them and let them release for a while. And just one thing I've noticed in the last couple of months, having been back in work as well, because I took this break for like 6 or 7 months, right? At the point I started looking for work, that's when I said the sabbatical's over. That was my point, it was over, and I got a job 2-3 weeks after that, one of us. But now I'm in the job, I can see myself, like there's things happen where I'm like, I'm reacting and responding differently than I would have a year or years ago. And I kind of often wonder, and they happen every now and again, like, oh no, like maybe I would have responded that way anyway in my normal job as well. But because I've had this gap, I feel I've almost had the chance to say, that's how I used to be, and this is how I am now. And it's because I can see it, and I don't know, it's like, you don't get to notice the change when you're still, you know, it's when you have a gap, you go, that's a bit different.
What, can you give us an example of how you're different? You think so?
Like, just in a work sense, like I remember something happened on a Friday, and I was like, you know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago would go, okay, I need to ring that person and do this and blah, blah, blah. And actually me now was like, well, maybe I'll just leave it alone for 2 days and see what happens. And I kind of just left it alone. I did some things, and I didn't spend time worrying about it. It was intentional. It's not like ignoring the problem. It was just doing this thing. And I'd made a few steps early, and it went to a good, successful outcome. But I knew me 5-6 years ago would be more swarming around and trying to make this happen.
I remember you 5-6 years ago. I would agree.
Yeah, I know. And I remember it's like, but it's almost a maturity of things around. It's maturity of calming, and that's like how much pressure you put on your things about these things. Like almost nothing needs that level of pressure. And why are you holding it to yourself anyway? Most of the time you should. Like, there's another great example. If you got a problem, right? Am I solving a problem? But if you were a doctor, we were all doctors, everyone would swarm around the patient trying to help that. Keeping it to yourself doesn't help. So I think a lot of those maturity things come with.
Awesome.
It sort of makes me think around, the benefit of the time off, and around this white paper by Nick Petrie, and it's about vertical leadership and how you can accelerate it, but it really is based around adult sort of development theory, and it's kind of about how you can kind of effectively expand your mindset, which is almost what I was thinking about when you were talking just then. You're coming back from your career break with almost an elevated, expanded mindset, and it sort of sets you up, as you continue on. And part of that sort of framing is around, you create these moments of heat experiences. It's like a Venn diagram. So you create heat experiences for yourself. You create colliding perspectives. So, going on that walk, the El Camino, like meeting different people, diverse perspectives is a perfect example of that. And then there's elevated sense making. And so there's also, and it can happen with the diverse perspectives, but it can also be through reading and having the time to reflect and chat with people that are kind of a little bit more in that different mindset than you, to help make sense of it all. And from that Venn diagram, if you can kind of get that sweet spot, you are in the perfect position to kind of get some of that elevated mindset thinking and kind of that vertical leadership development that's talked about. And so this kind of whole idea of you can do a sabbatical or career break that involves all of those things, you absolutely come back out the other side of it with that kind of coming back at you, getting all of the benefits, leveling up.
If I build on that, because in the second half of my sabbatical, it was like I did this Career Odyssey workout at Stanford. It's all free, and we were talking about it, and you were doing it. We kind of do it together. But out of that, you kind of plot 3 alternative career pathways, and you experiment with them. And so I ended up going for different ones. Say who's kind of doing what you're doing. There's lots of ways you can do it, but and so I ended up having conversations with people. I remember talking to an old schoolmate, and I hadn't talked to him, I'd say, in 13, 16 years. I hit him up on LinkedIn. I had a range of these conversations for like an hour, and I come off, I remember talking to Katie about going, you'd be buzzing from having this 9 o'clock in the morning conversation with someone over in bloody Spain or something. And it was just such, and it was all in the pursuit of, I wonder what that would look like and so on. So I never felt like when I was off, especially in that second half, it was all like kind of gathering and filtering in to see what might be next and kind of forming it. People kind of, I think you're in pursuit of an epiphany. I never felt like that, but then I kind of had a couple of epiphany moments as well. So it's weird, like.
I love that, in pursuit of an epiphany.
It's almost an oxymoron.
It feels like that. If you do this and do that,
Go and hunt it. It'll do that. Yeah.
Three things plus one of those, and then you'll get an epiphany.
I guess my reflection would be as well from even the conversation is, do you know what's not coming true enough? Maybe is how much fun it was. It was such a great time. It was I think. Like my friends were saying, I was so busy, but I was like, man, this is fantastic.
So you're not lying around at home, just lying in a hammock. Yeah, because that might be for the first little bit to recover or to stop, but we're kind of wired to do stuff, aren't we? Right, we want to do stuff. Can I just switch the focus a little? I want to talk about the hard bits, right? So we're talking about the value and how much fun it was. So if you were to reflect back over your time, you went, but there were some challenges and there was some pretty tough bits. What would those have been? I might even start, right? So I think the thing that I got most, there was 2 bits. One was foggy February, which was, I was shooting all over myself, right? I should do this, I should invest in that, I should achieve this by the time I'm done. And I was just telling myself all these things I had to do or should do because otherwise I'd fritter away my time, right? And I completely got my own way. I was just like, I was not having fun. Right? For a lot of February, I was like just getting tied up in knots. It was just such a painful time. We can come back to that maybe. The other bit was the fear of irrelevance. The fear of irrelevance when I was coming back, right? It's like that one of, will people actually want me around? Will they actually engage me and employ me and all that sort of stuff? And in my heart I was like, no, I'm good, but my head was like yours, like super noisy around that. And then it's funny, like with that one, I was like, I started to call clients again. They're like, are you back already? It's like your point, right? Like they're too busy with their own stuff.
I know this isn't going to follow the negative pathway we're on for a second, but one of the I'm sorry, but one of the best things I learned about on the sabbatical was, who am I when I'm not in a job? Am I in my job? Who am I when I'm in a job? And then I realised I am me when I'm not in a job. I'm the same person. And then I do jobs that I like to be in where I be. And I'm hired as much for who I am as for what I do. And it's
this identity thing that everybody attaches to their job though, or attaches to them, should I say. It's fascinating. And that who am I when I'm not in my job, I think is the perfect question to be asking. Because some people kind of feel like a lot of their status kind of gets wrapped up into their job. And so then
it becomes your identity.
And so I find that really interesting. As some of the reading that we're doing around it is, actually what helps to create resilience is when you can be really clear on what your different identities are and lean into those different identities. So when one of those falls through, like a job, you're very resilient around going, well, I'm also a person that loves to go hiking, and I'm also a parent, or I'm also a whatever, and I do this, and that, so that it kind of keeps you really resilient in that, which is also an interesting thing to explore when you've got on a break. It's great. Totally.
So come to the hard bits. What were the hard bits? I really want to hear the hard bits.
Oh, did I cry? I cried.
I'll jump in with the hard bits because I didn't get to. One of the things I really wanted to do as part of it was to get away and have a break, like go away somewhere, be in a different environment, and have a bit of a holiday. And I didn't get to do that. And for a while, I resented that.
Yeah.
So my career break unhelpfully coincided with renovating our house, which was a massive project, and I ended up sort of project managing it. So I had to sort of figure out my way through that resentment. And I did, my July was kind of like your February. I called it the goo phase, because it was almost like going through the stages of grief. There was a lot of emotion, sort of sadness, loss, fear, anxiety, that loss of identity, the shouty inner voice going, who's going to want you? What if nobody offers you a job? The doubt, you know. But then I came through that, and I found the joy in the relationships, the road trip with family.
I was going to ask you, what got you through it?
Yeah, and also realising that the who I am bit and the things that I'm good at meant that I could actually do a really good job project managing house renovation, which is something I've never done and probably would never do again. But it was just, okay, how am I, this is what I've got this time, I need to be grateful for that, how am I going to make the best of the situation? But the emotion was a big thing for me, and I've spoken to other people who have felt that sort of lots of conflicting emotions, particularly in that first little bit.
Yeah, that's what it was for me the second month. First month was the let go. I was like, fine. It was like holiday, play. Then back in, fun enough, was back at home. I wasn't on holiday anymore. And I was like, it was stark. And then all this stuff came up, right? Yeah. Any other hard bits?
I think, I mean, I'll go. There was, I think, from when I came back from Europe back to here, the first 2-3 weeks back was a little bit hard. I wouldn't say it's too hard. It was actually readjusting and establishing routines, and like, you know, just working out what they would be. And then so there was like, when I didn't have them, but when you had them, and morning routines as well, man, I was getting up earlier when I was off than when I was actually in a job. It was amazing. And November was probably the healthiest month I've had in years in terms of things I did. But then coming to probably similar stuff, when you come to the end of it and you're re-emerging back into the work, looking for work thing, it's a really alien thing, going back and looking to jobs and how they are set up and so on, and labels. So that took a while to kind of get my head around what it is, and labels are very important as well in there. But yeah, that's probably, I'd say one more, which is actually, and it's not super hard, but it was kind of a constant thing I had to do, because you have people who are kind of off but still semi-working, and I wanted trying to be off. And so like not getting back into thinking about what will I do in a couple of months when looking for a job, and like, you know, saying no to work when opportunities come. It's like, what if I don't get that opportunity? But I stuck to it, because I thought, for me, I hadn't done that work I wanted to do on the Career Odyssey stuff and where pathway. I hadn't done that, and I hadn't really lent into the things. And as soon as I knew if I'm looking towards that, it's going to take my mind away from where I wanted to put it right now. So that was probably, I had that tension back and forth.
Yeah, I had that tension too, and it's hard, but it's important, isn't it, to stick to your guns with that?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's kind of, there's the seduction, but what's the more strategic, right? And so how do you not be seduced by the short term and the whatever that trigger is for you?
Yeah,
right?
the seduction one is interesting, and I think that was a bit where getting prepared for that one, because there's a couple of things. One, I was handed a resignation saying that I'm doing this break, and then it was, could you just stay for X amount of time? And I was like, no. But it was, you know, there was like all really good reasons for it, and I just had to kind of stick to my guns with that. Could you extend, you know, when you start your break? And I was like, nah, you know, I've got plans. And then it was being, you know, rung up by some recruitment consultants and giving me some pretty appealing kind of offers, and I was just like, and you know, you could do this, and I was like, I'm taking a break for like at least 6 months. Oh well, what about if, you know, they rang me back? What about if you start here? And it was just like, man. But it was, you know, it's like testing your
quite
conviction.
flattering in a way, isn't it?
We're flattering, it's really nice, you know, but it's also like, it's that seduction thing, and it's kind of this thing where it's like, there's all of a sudden it's like, safety of knowing that you've got another job going to. You put some barriers out there and they've said yes to all your things. Now what do you reckon? It's like just kind of testing your conviction a bit.
So that's what I'm hearing pulled us through those challenges is like our intention and our conviction around why this mattered was the really important thing here, right? I'm not hearing, I had a bunch of people around me just saying, keep going. I'm hearing my voice in my heart saying, this is the important choice here, right?
Yeah, and for me, I came across this quote. Sorry, Colm. I came across this quote that was almost an anchor for me, and that was, sometimes you need to be your own hero. And for me, I loved that because I thought, it's only, I'm the only one who can hear this, sort of feel this sense of conviction, and I'm just gonna be my own hero through this.
And you're the only one that can live your life, right?
Yeah. And, but as a parent, and, there's lots of elements in life that force you to kind of be inclined to park that. But that was a really helpful mantra for me.
Yeah, Colm.
Again, looping back to that question about, practical tools and stuff like that. I use lots of practical tools. Like, you used them, you set them, and you kept going, right? So things like, because of the time off, there's that book Year by Design or Life by Design. I can't remember who, but Life by Design book. And then there's the Year by Design that we've talked about before, right? But for all the time of having that tool, the Year by Design and being intentional, I don't think I've ever actually had the time to really do it and really knuckle into what are the 4 or 5 categories of my life I want to really focus on. Not run a marathon, but like, the holistic, live a healthier life, whatever it is, but making those sentences out. I never had the time to do that, but I really did that this year.
I remember we had breakfast when you'd recently put all your categories in your journal. I remember your moleskin, and you showed me and how you'd scribbled all over it.
Oh, man.
And you'd kept coming back to it all the time, and it feels like it's become the bedrock of your decision making for everything.
It took me like months to get it down. But it was like a couple of them were easy, but a few more like they took the work. And when I got them there, it's not a test. No one gives a shit. Here, dig me. I did, thanks, Dad. Brilliant.
80%, mate.
So like, I was happy with it. 80, good. Perfect. I was only aiming for 70. So you got it done, and then you're like, I'm happy with it. And then I was able to do the things, which is like, well, actually for this next 3 months, what is the things I want to do? So one of the things I did was like, a coaching course. It was on the thing to do, and I ended up paying for that, and that became something I did over the first 2 quarters. It's like doing for your job what we all do, but doing it to your life. So that was one tool.
There you go.
But if I had the other tool that was super important to me, actually, and I think it builds on what you're saying, right? I think of you have to be your own hero. But the other tool that I've probably used more often than anything else over the last 5-6 years is the network analysis tool, right? This is one of the things like, the 20 people in your life. It's mostly from work, right? So who are the 20 people now? Who are the top 5 in terms of things, and what job do you want, and who might they be? But I spent some time thinking about that. And I had certain friends in my life like who are really important to me. And I was like, I want to bring them more into my life. And a lot of them aren't in New Zealand. They're in Canada, they're in Dublin, they're in different places. But because I did a lot of work making, this group of people are important, and geography is meaning I cannot be in touch with them the whole time or seeing them like this. But if they're important, I can actually make this happen. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And so then when things were coming up like job opportunities, or should I do this, or should I go and do this coaching course and stuff like that, I almost had this like my close friends were part of that journey from the whole way through for me, because I knew I thought about it.
That's great.
It's nothing that no one doesn't think about. It's just I was like really deliberate with it, and then I was bringing them in, and then with circumstances and doing the thing that was right. Just the purest example in the world is voice notes, right? Everyone knows a voice note on the phone. I used to laugh about them over here, but I went back to Europe. Everyone was using them. Some people love them, some people hate them. But my best mates lives in Dublin. And it was like, talking just doesn't work for timing zone the whole time. But I said, hey man, do you want to try doing voice notes? I love voice notes. We've been using voice notes back and forth now for like, 6 or 7 months, once or twice a week, stay in touch with each other's lives and stuff like that. that as an outcome of the sabbatical, that is so big for me, you know.
Little thing, right? And massive. What about, just staying on the theme of tools, what about for you, Katie or Jodi, like any tools or kind of things that really helped you squeeze the value out of the time? I don't know if that's the right metaphor.
Yeah, there's the tools going into it, like, and so, you know, we talked about the fear setting exercise, which is a goodie, and actually just doing your budget, like tracking how much you want to spend and tracking how much you spend each month coming up to that or week or whatever, and then practically actually mapping that out so you can actually figure whether you're comfortable with that or whether you need to dial down your lifestyle in order to do that. Like actually thinking through that is really helpful to take the fear away, like just practically working through that. And then the stuff, I guess it all just depends on what's your intent. So I absolutely think kind of get into the themes like we were talking about rather than over planning it is really cool. And then dotting it out with a few wish list items, but then not being so wedded to every single one of them. Being able to leave space to seize the opportunities as they come up and flex as you go is crucial because you won't get to everything.
And just on that, what helped me, just linking into that, is saying to myself, this is not the only time I'm doing a sabbatical. Right? Like, this is going to happen again. Yeah. And so if I don't get to do it this time, the thing this time, I might get to do it next time, right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to jump in with that.
That's a great point. Yeah. But then I think, and I guess it's back to Colm's point, you know, this whole thing around we do a lot of sort of some of the stuff about strategizing and visioning about the future of work and you know where's the organisation going next. It's like, do it for your bloody life. And so whenever you do it in this period, it's an amazing thing, and pick whatever tool you want. There's plenty of them out there. But thinking about the, you know, what's that future self going to be? What's that future kind of shaping up for you, and why is a awesome piece to do on it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I love that. Do it for yourself. And because what's coming up for me is, what if we zoom out and just go, okay, so we've all done it and we're sharing our personal experiences of doing it, the lessons and all that. What about the implications for the collective, for society, for organisations, for how organisations think about their people and their well-being and, you know, performance and all that? Where does that, if we zoom out and go, like, these lessons are great for us as individuals, so what about it for a collective? What comes up? Yeah.
I think it would create the possibility for, you know, I used the language levelling up before, but man, I think it could unleash people's potential in new ways. Like my reflection, and I feel like we've all landed in the same space, preparing for today, and because I did do some preparation, and thinking back over my time was that, you know, I thought that I was changing external stuff. I thought I was going into this is a transition phase, and I'm changing my job and I'm changing my environment. And what I've realised at the end is actually it was internal change 100%. That I was making, and as a consequence of me making internal change, external stuff has shifted. Yeah. And we talk about sabbatical or career break or whatever it is you want to call it, but it's kind of like a retreat for yourself. Yeah. It's your own bespoke personal development program that levels you up, gets you to a better place where you can be calmer or more present or more creative or more thoughtful because you've taken some time to do some work on yourself.
And as you said, then you are also, there's external stuff happening and you're more valuable to whoever you're working with as well. You know, one thing that's come up for me, so I've worked with a number of organisations as clients for a while now, and I've taken this bunch of time out, and what they've, so, you know, then a couple of months ago I said, I'm back, or I'm coming back, right? We should talk about how we do more work. And they go, cool, let's get into it again. Now, I'm not an employee, I'm a consultant, for want of a better word, with these organisations. Yet I'm adding value there's a value exchange that's going on. And I think they're better for it, I'm better for this time out. But I think a lot of the time with people who are employees, if they take the time out, it's like, oh no, I won't be able to go back. But it's like, well, my case is like they've just welcomed me back, right? So they just said, yeah, come back. So I'm part of their ecosystem of talent, if you like. And it's sort of been almost, I think, easier for me to do it than perhaps a former employee, because, you know, there's this kind of job description and boxes and lines on an org chart. Okay, what vacancy have we got? You know what I mean? It's sort of like this, what if we could dissolve that a bit?
I've got quite a few views on that one,
I thought you might, Katie. Yeah.
From being in HR for about 20 years, but no. No, I think organisations are rubbish at it, at supporting it, if I'm frank. And I think, and I think there's just so much lost opportunity there. So you see the same thing, there's themes in this when it comes to putting people on top talent programs or leadership programs, you know. And
I love the way your face just kind of
it's just a word, but whatever. But putting people on secondment, which people are a little bit more, organisations are a little bit more prone to do. They think that people might come back. But and then the sabbatical, you know, and you can kind of think about those three things. And organisations will set these things up for their people, and then people won't come back. So they're like, oh, why would I bother? Because people don't come back. And I'm kind of like, you're looking at this all wrong. You're looking at this, they'll come back to the same role that you decided that, you know, they would be leaving from, and then you expect them to do the same job. People have gone and done these amazing experiences, and they've elevated their mindset and learned all these different skills, and yet you offer them the same job. And I'm like, why would you do that? I'm like, so why don't you create this space which is where we'll have a role for you, but we're going to talk about what's different for you.
It might be we have work to do that you could help with.
Totally, sorry,
There's a different
absolutely.
frame, right?
Yeah, well, it's moving into the skills space now.
Which is, I remember reading Deloitte's Human Capital Trends report this year, and they were saying we need to shift from jobs to skills in terms of a frame, you know, and this is, I think, be able to take time out, but then think through the re-engagement through a skills lens as opposed to a coming back to a job lens, right?
I think there's something really interesting in this space, because we've been fortunate enough to be able to fund our sabbatical, and there's a lot of people out there I would expect who would love to be able to have the opportunity to do this, but financially it just doesn't make sense, or they can't face the idea of stepping into the unknown and not knowing what's going to happen at the end of that 3-5 months. So a friend of mine has taken time out, and he was fortunate enough to go back to his organisation, and he was offered a few different roles, and he stepped into one that appealed to him, and so that enabled him to take time and to get the benefit of that time without the stress or the pressure of not you know. So that's I think there are pockets of organisations out there that are creating that space, and to be able to offer that to people could be hugely
It's massive, particularly given what's happened post-COVID, Great Resignation, the whole idea of people just going, where does work fit in my life now, right? How does it, like Colm, your different buckets of things that are important, work's only one, right? Where does it fit in relation to all of them, and therefore how do I want to work? And organisations that will be more experimental are probably going to be more attractive.
I think some of this all comes down to humans' relationship with time, to be a bit poncy about it all.
No, that's good.
So we're talking about this now on a year-to-year basis, but if you zoomed out and so talked in decades, how different is the last 10 years from, say, even 3 decades before that? Like, if you're back in the 90s or the 80s as well, and what does work mean? Go back to the 40s. What did work mean in the 40s, you know? You read about that. Sometimes it's like people working until, what did retirement mean? When pensions actually came in? So in that scheme of 100 years, things have changed dramatically. So if you come back to today and what we're talking about, absolutely, sounds this huge opportunity. But I think there's 2 parts I'd add to it. One is, and this is the philosophical thing, but maybe we all need a bit more philosophy coming into our lives about what does it mean to be human, what is the human experience. Because we are faced in a world where there dramatic changes are coming at a gigantic pace. And so what is a world where AI has evolved even more beyond now to what's it 5 years, 10 years, and what does that mean to a person in a work experience situation then? So those are the questions I'm wondering, how does this fit in with all that and reimagining of jobs? It's going to be an interesting world.
You know what you're doing? You're doing your Camino thing of just lobbing questions out rather than answers. It's awesome.
Questions are more fun than answers.
Especially questions that big.
Yeah, but it does feel like we're kind of exploring territory that does feel really relevant right now. And, you know, there's so many people when I've said, oh, we're going to do this session and we're going to record it, so many people going, when do I get to see that?
Yeah.
And not just for themselves, for their teams, for their organisations. So there's kind of a vibe right now about this stuff. Right? So, yeah.
It's interesting to hear everyone talk about tools. I think there's an opportunity to create the playbook.
Yep. Well, we're doing it. Yeah. We'll just watch this video for starters. I feel like we're coming to the end of our time, and I'm thinking, how do we wrap this up? And I'm wondering, maybe the best thing to do is to, if there was, for anyone considering taking a career break, sabbatical, becoming unemployed, whatever we're going to call it, what is if there was one way to help people who are sitting on the fence, just going, I don't know, shouldn't I? If you were to give one piece of advice, and we know the answer is do it, but what's the thing to help you get over the line? I wonder whether there's one practical thing that you would share with them about that might be helpful. What would you say?
I'd say listen to your instincts and trust them.
Nice.
I'd say vision, really fast forward, you know, do a bit of time travelling around visioning what it'll be like at the other side.
What's the payoff I want to have
I
happen?
focus so much on like, I'm so worried about making that first step. And I'm like, vision what it's going to be like at the end of it. And spend some time in that, you know?
Yeah.
I was writing this morning about possibility focus versus problem focus, and that we tend to focus too much on problem. Let's focus on possibility, right?
Yeah.
You're saying, Katie, dial that up.
100%.
Yeah. What's yours, Colm? What's your...
I'll do a combo. I think one is, it is okay and normal to be afraid. I think fear is the most prevalent emotion that unites the world, right? I think we're all afraid of something. So actually, in this situation, putting down on a piece of paper somewhere, what are those fears? And working through, well, how can I mitigate them and how can I plan around them as well? Because most of the time, they're not as scary as you think when you put them down. Or you work on. That's the second thing, and that's the first. And the second one is, to your point as well, I think it is good to think about the end of your life. And say you're 85 or 90, it's not morbid. It is good to say, I want to have lived a great life. What are the things that will enable me to live a good life? And it is taking those steps back here 20, 40, 60 years ago that will make you happy living there going, man, I've lived a frigging great life.
I've got shivers. And mine would be read Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks, which is the amount of weeks we get in our lifetime. And then go, how do I want to use this one wild and precious life, to paraphrase Mary Oliver, right?
Yeah.
And your answer to that will nudge you, I think. Last question. Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
Yeah, my plan is to do it every 5 to 7 years. So yes. Keep going, yes.
Totally. And I would say, how can you maintain some of that mindset in your weekly, daily life?
Beautiful. I can't believe you're saying 5 to 7. I'm like, can I make it 3?
Maybe. Little snippets in between. It depends on the period, right? I've got mini breaks in between that one.
Which is really interesting, right? Because we've gone grandiose 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
But how do you build it in on a weekly basis?
Yeah.
You know, half a day off or a Friday or whatever. How do you do it on a quarterly basis? Maybe it's a week, a quarter, 6 monthly, annually, there's multiple levels of timescale. Right?
Totally. And if in each of those little moments you can stay connected to the lessons or the great stuff that comes out of it and stay connected to that, then...
So that's a really good point.
Yeah.
When we're talking about tools, keep going, circling back to all the stuff.
Yeah. What's your highlights reel? What are your lessons? Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I think there's a better last question. What have you each learned today from this conversation?
I've been surprised at the similar themes that have come through. Because I was coming into this thinking, wow, I didn't get to go to Camino or like go overseas or do any of that fun stuff. But that sense of levelling up, that sense of getting a deeper appreciation of who we are and then taking that out, and like showing up in a new way, shedding some of the skin. I kind of imagine letting go of a cloak and walking forward without that weight attached to it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's just like a movement. It's just so exciting to be around people that are doing it. And so, yeah, and it's, you know, we've got another group which was sort of, you know, has built out of this, and it's like the Career Odyssey group, and we kind of like, there's all this stuff, it's like, oh, it's a wee movement, keep going, you do it. And it's just like, more people should do it.
So cool.
Yeah.
I think it's just being reminded that some of the best things in life come from doing some of the things that you are most scared to do.
Yes.
Yep.
100%.
So thank you. My lesson is that the depth that we have together and what we can create just by through conversation around this is just so powerful. I'm tingling from, remember I said right at the start, I can't wait for this conversation. And I feel even more convicted to get this message out. And I keep imagining right through this conversation, I wonder who's watching this and what they're doing. Is this exciting them? I hope it is. And so thank you. It's been awesome, hey?
Thanks, Digby.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I reckon we
loved
might
it.
have to do it again. Round 2 at some point.
Absolutely.
But we're going to the pub now.
And there you have it, folks. I hope this conversation's got you thinking about the benefits and the practicalities of taking career breaks. And if not now, then perhaps for some time in the future. And maybe you'll know someone else who has been thinking about it as well, or maybe could do with thinking about it. And please forward this episode to them and tell them what you got out of it as well. If you're interested in learning more about career breaks, we set up a page called digbyscott.com/career breaks, where there's more resources that we'll be adding all the time around the idea of career breaks. So dive in there and grab what's there as well. And we'll keep in touch. If this is something that's of interest to you, for you personally or your organisation, I'd love it if you could just drop me a line. Again, just jump onto the website and contact me that way, digbyscott.com. And let's have a conversation about how we can make this work and make this world of work even better for everyone. For now, I'm Digby Scott. This is Dig Deeper. Go well and see you soon.